That's right.
advocating.
My advocator. That's right. For yourself first and foremost.
Right. And I want to say this. And I did it in a way that did not get me in any trouble. You know what I mean? Didn't get nobody else in any trouble. We did it the right way, and we got what we needed, you
And
know.
a lot of times we do, and a lot of times we do things the right way when we progressing and we growing and
Yeah.
developing in that system,
Right.
because there's a lot of things that the unwritten rules that the system have against us, a lot of times in the prison system. And so that you did right,
Yeah.
you did right,
If you
and you became a asset after being an instructor. Now you're an asset, no longer a liability to the program. So it's hard to get rid of you now.
if you look at my shirt, these are the time honored words of John Lewis.
Good trouble, good trouble.
And that's what I was getting into.
That's right.
I was getting into some good trouble. And I'm gonna tell you something. One of the greatest joys, being free, is to be able to go back and give due respect and honor to those that went before us, and got into this good trouble to make it to where we have these things today.
That's
So
right. Can't forget about that.
a couple of weeks ago, during the 59th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, I went to Selma, Alabama. This was maybe 3 weeks ago. I went to Selma,
Right.
Alabama, and I marched across Edmund Pettus Bridge. That's where I got this shirt, Good Trouble. And
Nice.
I did that because thank you, man. Listen, bro, they were
Right.
the ones that did it. You know what I mean? All I was there to do is just give respect, and let me tell you something. They started something back then that we're still struggling to get today. Now, if you remember, they wanted to march across that bridge. So when the Voting Rights Act was being signed, right, there is a population of people today that are not allowed to vote, and that is system impacted people with felony convictions. I'm not allowed to vote because of my felony conviction for felony first degree murder. And when I marched across that bridge, not only was I giving honor and respect to those who paved the way before me, but the struggle still is alive today for those
That's
that have served their time and want to now rejoin this fabric of society. And there's this one final bridge that we need to cross, and that is restoring the vote for those who have served their time, man.
that's right.
Don't
And
get me started.
that's right. And then let me say this. I came home August 10th, 2020. And when I came home, prior to me coming home, in 2019, they just passed it in New York State for us to be able to vote on
Beautiful.
on parole with a felony. And
Wow.
so when I came home in 2020, I went right to that box and I voted. You heard? And it was the best feeling in the world. And it still is every year. You know what I'm saying? I vote on something, dealing with our community. I vote. And I wanna transition because
Mm.
this is a good segue for us to get into, our cell therapy session.
Okay, on the beat.
Yeah, so this is Success After Lockdown cell therapy session where we deal with mental health issues with formerly incarcerated men, women, and we created this in StreamYard on here. And this has been very effective for us because I think mental health is a really huge topic in discussion for men and women like ourselves that's been formerly incarcerated, and we can talk about people that haven't been formerly incarcerated too, because I think everybody goes through have some type of mental health issues, just being alive. There's issues that go on, and I think that we go through a lot of trauma, formerly incarcerated men and women prior to us coming to prison. And a lot of people don't talk about that. If you could, expound on that, we feel
Yeah.
free.
Yes, absolutely. So for me, you know, I can talk about sadness and depression as I experienced it coming into the system at the age of 18, being one of the youngest people in the nation at the time to be facing the death penalty, and the roller coaster ride that I went on
Mm,
when my jury found me not guilty of premeditated murder, and the state withdrew its request for the death penalty, but yet the judge gave me a life sentence because that was the only other sentence that he could give me, when I was convicted of first degree felony murder. And so I was just like on this emotional roller coaster, up and down and up and down. And then there was the appeals processes where, lawyers and attorneys, they would just build me up and build up my parents, and thinking that things were going to get turned around. And then we would get a denial. So I went through, a lot of bouts, of sadness. And I just want to make clear that, I, in my own mind, draw a line between sadness and depression. Depression to me is something where it will cause you to lay in your bunk and not get up, not go to chow hall, not eat, not do anything positive, and you're just sick in your mind. And those are valid feelings, and because it happens to people when they're faced with these seemingly insurmountable challenges in prison. But for me, because of my faith in God, the support that I had from my family, and because of the positive programs in which I was involved, I was able to keep my sadness and my frustration from going into depression, if that makes any sense. I mean, I was always at that edge where I could have gone into some type of clinical depression, but I thank God that because of the supports and the mentors that I had around me, mentors from the outside, mentors from the inside, like Maceo on the inside, Judge William White Jr. on the outside, my parents. Those contact visits with my parents were crucial. Those things meant more than visits on a tablet or a phone call any day. So
absolutely. Makes a whole lot of sense too.
yeah, and so for me, that was my mental that's my mental health minute right there for your listeners. If you're facing any type of deep sadness or whatever, just know that you can easily slip into depression, right? And like I said, those are valid emotions, those are real, and it's good to acknowledge them, but to also be able to find those supports, talk to somebody, share what's going on, journal, write poetry, find ways to express your feelings. Man, I got journals and journals and journals, and over 40 poems and essays and things where I just poured out my soul onto that paper, man. Like sitting in a cell in a Florida broiler box, sweat running down my arms, sticking to the paper, penning out these words, man, that were coming out of my soul, but they were all cell therapy for me.
Yeah, no question. And I like to, we talk about when we talk about this mental health issue too. Um, I had a lot of people that I spoke with, I had these discussions with, and a lot of them, come home and they suffer from this trauma that they didn't realize they have. Some did do realize that it came from, like I have, my brother that does Success After Lockdown podcast with myself, my brother Anthony. He when he hears a clanking, like the
Hmm.
bars or the gates closing, he has this moment where he feels this depression that comes on. You know,
Yeah.
is there anything that you remember that that kind of brought with yourself upon being released,
Hmm.
that you have to share?
Oh yeah. So how many of those of us so I did 31 years, 2 months and 8 days. And in that time, I've seen people killed and I've seen riots. And a lot of times bad stuff would happen in a chow hall, right? Because chow hall is where all different dorms would mingle. And, you know, if a guy owed a guy some money on a pick ticket or something like that, or something, it'd go down in chow hall. And I wonder how many people who have gotten out will go in a restaurant and want to make sure that they sit at a table where they can see the doors and the exits of that restaurant.
Absolutely. I would dare to say at least 90%. Even in New York State, and so it's everywhere that affects us.
There is so I have just started actually doing some literature reading on this. There is something very real, and I believe this. It's called post-incarceration syndrome. It's almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome, but the
Picks.
difference is PICS. Yes.
That's right.
The main difference is like when guys and women come back from war or military and they have PTSD, it was usually like a single traumatic event that triggered something in them that causes them to have that PTSD and triggers it when they're home.